It's always interesting who God puts in your life when you expect Him to do so. I had an instance here several years ago where I sell commercial insurance for a living, and I get to meet a lot of interesting people. And God placed this fellow with a really cool accent from New Zealand into my life. He was in the process of starting a new trucking company. He was going to go from a startup company to a rather large company overnight because of some investors that he had. And the interesting thing was, the guy had such a tender heart, and God led me to share the gospel with him early on in our relationship. And in so doing, he very quickly, in a very nice way, he rejected the gospel. And he let me know that he was an atheist, and that although he appreciated what I had done, he just was not interested in going any further. And at that time, just like everyone else, I never try to argue someone into heaven.
I'm a photographer, and last fall I had a client call, or a customer call. It was a family appointment that I had to do. One thing about this day, it was pouring down raining. It's one of them days, 100% chance of rain, and it just rained constantly. So my employee called our customers and said, look, can we reschedule? It just doesn't look like it's going to get any better. The lady that she was talking to said, look, we have to do this picture. We have to do it. My husband is dying. So we drove that afternoon, we drove in the pouring down raining to the house that we were going to, and prayed the whole way there. God, please, please, please stop the rain. I remember pulling the driveway, pouring down raining. I ran up to the carport. She came out and said, I'm sorry, but we're just going to stay here and just see what happens. 5 minutes later, the rain miraculously stopped, and the most prettiest light came out. And they came out, and her husband, I think he had 3 or 4 months to live that time, had cancer. And we did the photograph. These were some of the nicest people I've ever met in my life. And I remember we were about to leave, and I walked up to him. I said, man, we have prayed all the way here that it would stop raining. And I tell you, I'm so excited about these pictures. I think they're going to be beautiful. And so I made it happen the next day where they could come in and look at their pictures. And I remember that morning I called a lady that I knew, and I asked them, because when I was there and I left that day, I said, these are sweet people. Why didn't I share my faith with them? And so the next morning I called a lady that knew these people, and I said, well, can you tell me about them? Can you tell me about their faith? And she said, well, Phil, I've got some bad news. They're atheists. They don't believe in God. I said, well, that's still not going to stop me from what God had laid on my heart. So that afternoon, they came into the studio, and they sat in my sales room. And before we look at our pictures, I said, sir, I've got something I need to tell you. It is a long, long story, and I can't tell it in the time that we have now. But it was a beautiful story. I shared the gospel with this atheist. Tears streaming down his eyes. He says, I believe. And I believe with all my heart this gentleman is in heaven today. You just heard an encounter that Mark had with an atheist. I shared a testimony of an encounter that I had with an atheist. And one unique thing about this particular story is the guy that we're talking about is the exact same guy. The exact same guy. Mark had shared the gospel. He had thrown the gospel seed to him a few years earlier, and he rejected. And I shared the gospel with him, and his heart was fertile. The soil was fertile. It received the seed, and I believe with all my heart that today he's born again. And he received Christ that day, and to God be the glory for that. He did die 7 days later. They thought he had 3 or 4 months to live, but he did die 7 days later. And I remember talking to Mark about evangelism. And before we even knew about this encounter, we were on the phone sharing some things, and I was asking him how he shared the gospel. And as the conversation progressed, and I was telling him about this event, Mark kept asking me, wait a minute, who did you say that was? And then, of course, we rejoiced.